Welcome to the Boundless Bible. My name is David Shapiro.
Hey, I'm Javi Marquez.
And I'm Jason Holloway.
Welcome to the Boundless Bible. This is a very special episode.
Very
this
exciting.
Is the beginning of Women's History Month, if you don't know that. And for that, we have an incredibly special guest today. We have Mary Southerland. Now, Mary Southerland is an international author and speaker. Her books include Hope in the Midst of Depression, Sandpaper People, Escaping the Stress Trap, Experiencing God's Power in Your Ministry, and many others.
Amen.
She founded Journey Ministry and co-founder of Girlfriends in God. Her greatest ministry, though, is that of a wife, a mother of 2, and grandmother of 7. Her goal is to leave it all on the playing field of life, skidding into heaven with her hair on fire, saying, "Wow, what a ride, Lord." Her website is marysutherland.com, but I know Mary, so I'm going to take a step back and I'm just going to say that Mary is just an incredible person. Forget about the knowledge, forget about all of that. I will tell you what she does. If you bring yourself back to being a baby in the womb, all you hear is a heartbeat. That's all you're hearing all day, all night, 24 hours a day is a heartbeat. And it's comforting. That's your mother who's there. That's that strong woman. And you hear that strong heartbeat and she's nourishing you. And while you're inside of her womb, all you're hearing is everything's going to be okay. You're going to have this wonderful life. Everything's going to be great. Everything's going to be okay. That's what Mary is to me and so many others.
Wow.
She's that heartbeat who just says, you're going to be okay. She's the most amazing woman, and I'm so excited to have her on the show.
Yeah.
Welcome, Mary.
Welcome,
Thank
Mary.
you so much. I've not had an introduction like that. That was a winner.
I appreciate it.
It was solid. I can't say that I've met you too much before. I mean, we've seen each other
Yes.
around, but
Yes.
my wife speaks so highly of you, and I'm very excited today. And I can't say that I've been this nervous on this podcast.
Oh my goodness!
Since
Stop it.
today. So let's see how
Stop
today
it.
works
Stop.
out.
Yes. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you.
So the other thing, other than being March and the beginning of Women's History Month, is this is actually leading right into the Jewish holiday of Purim, and that is the story of Esther. And a quick background of Esther is Esther is a Jewish woman who became queen in Persia for King Xerxes, and with her and Mordecai, her cousin, kind of devised a plan when Haman was trying to eradicate all the Jewish people, came up with a strategy and a plan to save all of the Jewish people from annihilation. And it's just this really beautiful story. The problem with this story is that it is one that many scholars and many people over the years tried to remove from the Bible.
Yeah.
It's only one of 2
Bad.
Bible stories that have a woman's name as a title. And this one doesn't have God within the name of God within the story. So, but we're going to get to that in a second. First, I just want to ask, this is something that a lot of scholars say as well, and I'm very interested about this. Esther is seen as this beautiful woman. They keep talking about her beauty, but when it comes to who devised the plans and who came up with it and who, executed it, they keep going back to Mordecai, and they say that Esther really was just eye candy. How do we feel about that?
Not good. She was a lot more than eye candy.
Yeah.
She was a very strong woman, a teenager. She was a teenage girl. Can you imagine a teenager being appointed as queen? And so I'm sure she was terrified. But Esther was the one that had the courage to go to her husband.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you went to the king without an appointment, you would die.
Yeah.
Yep.
But so her people fasted and prayed for her, and she went knowing that death was a possibility, even though he was her husband. She had backbone. She had conviction.
Yep.
She was willing to step out in faith. Women can be tough, or they could be soft, or they could be both. And I think that's who Esther was. Esther 4:14 says, and who knows, you may have been chosen queen for just such a time as this.
Yeah.
And I believe that. I believe she was chosen to be the queen for this very specific time in history. So to call her just eye candy, no bueno.
No. Agreed. I love that line too. That the time such as this became
Yes.
that line for me through this whole story.
Yeah.
It just triggers everything else. The time
does.
such as this, right? It's like
Absolutely.
she has to make this decision, and it's a critical time
Yes.
in the history of the Jewish faith, or
Oh,
the
absolutely.
Israelites, and it's the time such as this. And I think, how many times do we have a time such as this in our own life? And we
Yes.
have to answer that question. We have to answer that call. We have to answer that, what God is asking us to do, and are we willing to be the Esther?
Yes, that's one of the reasons this does apply to us today,
I think so. I love it.
because God has a plan for each one of us, and we are appointed at a certain time and a certain place and with certain people to do certain things. And God has placed that call on our lives, and we need to be like Esther and just step out in faith, even though we're terrified.
Yeah.
Well, and even taking a huge step back. I mean, the beginning of the book tells you what her fate would have been had she said no.
Oh, yeah.
And, it's very clear. It's very clear. If you don't do exactly what I say, even if it's absurd,
Right.
you're gone.
Yeah.
You're done. Like, and it's flick of a switch. Like, it's not a remorse. It's just like that. So for her to know already that she was stepping into this danger,
Yes.
it means it was very, very clear that she knew what the possible consequences
Yeah.
were.
She was, in my opinion, quite a woman.
Agreed. Super
Yeah.
strong.
Absolutely. And when we look at her life, she's somebody who was orphaned. This
Yes.
is somebody who was raised by Mordecai. This is somebody who, from the beginning, had to be a very strong woman. And so, yes, when we see the story, although she is a beautiful woman, and they do mention that, it wasn't her beauty that saved them. It wasn't the fact that she
No.
was beautiful that's what saved them.
Absolutely.
It was her conviction and her courage and her trust in the Lord.
Yes. And she did trust him. She must have.
So in that, let me ask the second question, because it is very interesting that she trusted the Lord. That one of the reasons people want to remove the book is because God's name is not mentioned in this book.
Right.
How do we feel about God not being mentioned in the book of Esther?
I did not realize that until I read that question. And I went, that can't be right.
Yeah.
So I went back and read the book, and I went, that's right. He's not mentioned.
Yeah.
But this is a historical book.
Yeah.
It's in the Bible for its historical value. It is not there for theology. And God is at work behind the scenes, even though when he may not be mentioned, but he's at work, just like today. So many times we can't see
Right.
him, but we know he's working. And I think this is exactly what was happening with the book of Esther.
That's the same takeaway I got as
Yeah.
well. I learned about that basically this week as well, that he wasn't in the book, that God wasn't mentioned in the book. But I think it's actually significant because this is the time that the Israelites were exiled, and many
Yes.
of them were in Persia, and
Yeah.
that was a godless time.
Yes, it
by them,
was.
they were not being spoken to by God. They were
Mhm.
not being communicated to by God. So it even deepens the theory of, like, she knew she had to step out and do what's right,
Right.
but she had to do so on true faith, because it wasn't
Yes.
like God didn't say it to her. Mordecai said it to her.
Exactly.
And so she had to step out on 2 times extra faith and say, I do believe this. And might even be, you notice the fact that she's an orphan? The
Yes.
fact that she's orphan also goes back to this. Like, that's the speaking of taking 2 steps away from God. Like, she's steps away from her fathers. She is separated from, her own tradition even.
Right.
And yet, when the time comes, as a time such as this,
Yes.
she still steps to the call.
Amazing.
I'm going to do what I always do. So, her name originally was Hadassah, which means myrtle, changed to Esther, which when you look at Persian, the Persian name Esther is what she was given. But when you look at what Esther means in Hebrew, it actually means hidden. And you go, okay, that's great. It's hidden. But is God hidden in this story? Now we know he's the one who is.
Oh, that's clever.
orchestrating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we know the one that he's the one who's
Right.
who's navigating the steps.
Yeah, for
Yes.
sure.
But there also are acrostics in this book, and a lot of scholars talk about this. And what an acrostic is, if you take the first letter of a word in a sentence or the first letter in a word in a paragraph,
Right.
it makes a different word. And we actually find it 4 times in the book of Esther. Esther 1:20, Esther 5:4, Esther 5:13, and Esther 7:7. And this is when you take lines in each line, words of each line, it actually spells out Yahweh.
No way.
Oh,
Yes.
Oh, that's neat.
So Yahweh is hidden in it. And what's even more interesting is it's actually written forwards and backwards. When it is a Israelite, a Hebrew, in that line, it's written forwards. When it is a Gentile, it's written backwards.
No way.
Yeah,
Huh.
absolutely.
Whoa.
Wow.
That's cool.
So this is, again, it's something where, can you look into it and go, hey, it's just coincidence? Absolutely. It could be coincidence. Words just, go together and you can find whatever you want in those words. Or could it be that Esther, which means hidden, God was hidden within this story the entire time. He
Oh,
did
that's-
move the steps, but his name it does appear there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, it seems like coincidence too. Maybe you could you could put it up that way in a sense of how things happen. I feel like God is all over this book and how each step and how it worked out for Mordecai to hear the plot.
Right.
For the Xerxes to even hear out what Esther was asking.
Yes.
And everything like that. God has to be in play and all that.
Absolutely.
And ultimately, God's justice is resolved at the end,
Yes.
right? I mean, that's the thing
Exactly.
too. Is whether or
Yes.
not you can see him through the story, you can see his work at work.
Right.
You can see him at play in the beginning, in the middle, even through the Esther had to come to be the queen in the first place by the other woman having to go. So like you get to see the concatenation of events that lead up to it, which they seem divine if nothing else. I mean, they're so specific; they seem divine. Yeah. And so to end with, all being right in the world, so to speak, and being able to speak, to have Purim and be able to then follow through that tradition, he's there, fingerprints everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And whether or not he's hidden or he's out in plain sight, I don't think there's any denying that this story does have God in it. It should be included
Yes,
in
it
canon.
should.
Yeah.
There's no
glad it
doubt
is.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So being that I kind of went into the Jewish side of things, Esther keeps her Jewish background a secret until it's necessary. Do you think this is a reminder of God's timing? And how did she display that?
Oh, I think that's absolutely a sign of God's timing. There is a specific time and place for everything. And God had this arranged, and she knew. She had prayed and she had fasted with her people about doing this.
Right.
And she knew that she needed to go to the king. And that the funny thing about this, I don't know if the king found it very funny, but he did not know that she was a Jew until she revealed it to him. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised, honey. I'm a Jew. But Haman came into the picture too during this time. He's a very influential and evil officer in the king's court. And he got elected to the second highest position in the land, and he hated the Jews. And he would do anything to destroy them.
Yeah.
And so he talked the king into passing a law that said, if you do not bow to the king, you will be executed.
Right.
Knowing that the Jewish people would never bow to the king. They only bowed to God. And so that was his plan for getting rid of all these people. And when he found out that Esther was a Jew, he was livid. Although he really wasn't angry with her. He was angry at Haman and the plot against his life. God raised up Esther, I think, to save her people. And she had to do it at this certain time.
Yeah.
When Haman was elected and became the second official, highest in the land, then I think she was like, okay, it is time. So the people fasted and they prayed. And, I love that because we need to do the same thing. We need to be willing to fast and pray and say, God, what is it that you want me to do?
Amen. And
when do you want me to do it? So I think that's huge that she was willing to do those things.
Yeah.
You mentioned Haman as well, and I think that one of the Haman was an Agagite. Is that right? Agadite. I don't remember which one.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the word is exactly, but which I know is also speaks to the symbolism of the whole thing. Like Haman didn't like Mordecai because Haman was an Agagite. I think is what it is.
I think so.
And Mordecai was a Jew, but also the reason that the Agagite would have been significant is because it's the people of Israel and the people of the king of Agar. Or Agad, who I'm not super great with the names, who were destroyed by Samuel, I believe, earlier. So it's like this, like the Bible is so full of these themes of these people versus these people, and these people coming together to connect with these people. And this is one of those situations where it's definitely two groups of people who are fighting against each other. And the story, besides being a great literal story, it's also a big kind of political story and a big communal and societal story to say, like, the people of Israel are in exile in Persia, and maybe they do need to lay low for a little bit. Maybe they do need to lay low, but they have to wait for their time, right? And you'll know when it's your time. When it's your time, you need to step out and do it. So, besides the singular story of the individuals, it's also a story of a society. It's also a story of a people as a whole.
Kind of rings true of our society today.
That's what I was thinking, right?
It really does. I mean, the political views of that day as compared to today. I mean, the world's a mess, but there are Christians who are beginning to step up and step out and voice their faith and voice their political views based on that faith. And so I think this really does apply to us today.
Going back into timing, just out of curiosity, what do you guys think when somebody says, they're trying to figure out God's timing? Obviously, our timing is a lot quicker. We want things immediately. Yeah. We have the microwave and the phone, and we want it now. And what do you guys think about somebody who says, "Hey, I want these things. I'm trying to follow God's timing," and then they go, "But," and then they're waiting for the thing to happen. What do you guys think? How is that something you can talk about with somebody who is trying to follow God's timing and they look at the story, they go, I mean, how did she get it right? How do I get it right? I
think to find God's timing and his plan, you just pray for the next step.
That's good.
What is the next step, Father?
Right.
And he always will reveal the next step. And before you know it, you'll look around and you're in the middle of God's plan for your life because you've taken each individual step as he's directed you to.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think about more of the results of things and not really enjoying the journey of this life and this walk. And as I'm learning that God just shows me one or two steps, maybe just one, maybe half a step in front of me, and I have to trust that. And I know the next few steps he got me, and I just got to trust in the fact that once I make this one step that he's showing me, everything else would lead me to where he wants me.
Absolutely.
I saw a funny meme the other day that was like, what you expect God to do when he talks to you. And it's a guy standing at his kitchen sink, like doing dishes. And it says, hey, I hear you. You need to go on a mission trip, and I'm going to give you $10,000 and quit your job and blah, blah, blah. And it goes through this stuff. And then it goes, what really happens when God talks to you? Hey, I need you to quit your job. And then what's next? God, what's next? He's like, what God really speaks to you is one step at a time. I thought that meme was hysterical.
That is hysterical.
That's spot on.
I also think we talk a lot about in this podcast about the what faith means and the importance of faith. And a lot of times faith is stepping out and having no idea where it's going to go.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing that I found so interesting in some of the reading I was doing this week is, again, this is the exile period.
Right.
There are generations upon generations of people who have not heard from God. And they have had no fruit from God in this case. They have been separated from their homeland.
Right.
They have become exiles. Many have become slaves. At this point, they're probably not slaves, but there's all this stuff that's happened, and they have been literally in a quiet zone with God.
Right.
And yet, this is where faith steps in.
Yes.
Even if you don't get that next step, Javi, and like if I don't get that next step, it's not pointed to you, but like you said, so I'm pointing at you, but even if I don't get that next step, I still have to continue my walk of faith. I still have to say, I know it's coming. Is that hard? Unbelievably.
Yes.
Unbelievably hard.
I was going to say the other thing of that is he might give you the next step, and it's a hard step to take.
Oh, that's
so I'm looking at Esther. Go talk to Xerxes. Tell him to release your people.
Right.
That's a hard step to ask.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think about Moses. Like, go talk to the Pharaoh and do that. Like, that's a hard step, right?
The best part,
patiently waiting. Now go do this. What? Oh, I waited all this time for this.
The most consistent part, though, is she said no at first.
Yeah,
she said no, like so many other great prophets before her, or people before her.
I would have said no.
She said no first, and I think this is another thing that's really important in the story. She didn't just jump up and go, "Sure,
yeah,
sure."
No, she was.
In fact, very, very clearly in my mind, she first says no. She's reminded of the love of God. She's reminded that the way to know what the next step is to pray and fast.
Right.
Exactly. Which super key to the story. And then I also found it interesting that she didn't just jump in and go, "Hey, hubby, need a favor."
Hey.
She threw two feasts. Like, let me soothe this conversation into place so I can have it. It's a smart way to do it.
Oh, that's what every woman does. Throw a banquet, throw a party.
Throw a banquet, throw a party. Like,
my heart is food.
Right.
Yeah,
well, that's what I'm saying. If you want something from somebody, you should, or if you have a request, start with food.
Start with food. It always works.
I definitely think with timing, we have to remember there are three things that are in play. We have our mind, we have our heart, we have our soul. And when they are separated, they're not ever going to work. So if I am thinking with my mind and I'm going, hey, this is that, I'm trying to plan everything, it's not having faith in God. When I use only my heart, what's happening is I'm jumping at everything. I'm saying that's from God. I'm gonna jump on it, and that's it. And then you have your soul, which is the one that's really connected, but it's not really going to trigger until you put it all into play. So God's not going to just say, hey, I'm going to connect with your soul because you're a nice guy and it's a great, it's a Tuesday. It's going to be, hey, when your heart and your mind is on me, when you are praying to me with your whole body, with all of your mind, with all of your heart, I will connect you to that next step.
Right.
And I think that that's really important for people is, they go, well, I'm saying the right things. Why isn't this happening? Or I'm feeling the right things. Why isn't this happening? It's not a matter of just feeling or just thinking. It's really learning how to connect all those things at the same time and praying and fasting and taking the leap of faith and going, sometimes the answer is wait. Sometimes it's, hey, throw 2 banquets first.
Yeah.
The only way you'll know that is to give that over to God and not take it for yourself. As soon as you take it for yourself and you try to put the guesswork in, I mean, I know I would be wrong every single time. And my wife will agree.
That reminds me of Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 is exactly what you're saying. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. And when I say, what does all literally mean? All the ladies in my Bible study go, all. And it means everything, nothing held back. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. Boy, I can do that. I can lean on my own understanding and everybody else's around me and leave God for last. In all your ways, again, all means in every part of your life, acknowledge him.
Yeah.
And acknowledge literally means to lay down flat, face down to the ground. Acknowledge him in every part of your life. And he will direct your path. So there's 3 conditions and the promise. We'll know God's path when we do those first 3 conditions.
Strong.
That's good. Yeah.
So the next question I'm going to jump right into, Queen Vashti, she refused in the beginning to come to King Xerxes' party.
Yeah.
And that was it.
How
She's
dare
done.
Yeah.
Cut.
See ya.
Is this the first true feminist of the Bible?
Well,
I didn't see that. I didn't see it that way, but
no.
Go ahead, Mary. Yeah.
Any Jewish historian will tell you that feminism did not exist among the ancient Hebrews. That's a modern history phenomenon, unfortunately. And any Jewish student of human behavior will tell you that strong-willed women always have been a part of the Jewish history. If you think back to anything Jewish, whether it's a Broadway play, I mean, the Jewish woman was tough. She was strong and firm in her decisions and her words. I tend to think that she was a strong-willed woman, and I can relate to that. My husband would tell you. And sometimes that means she was a difficult woman.
Yeah.
So I think that's the deal with her.
Yeah, that's what I got out of it. I got that she was, first of all, they're doing, this is like what? The day 160 something into the party.
Of the party.
Right, it's like 180 days of partying.
You're right.
Right. She's having her own banquet as well.
Yes.
And he's asking her to come here now. So she's entertaining guests. He didn't respect her, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think it's significant too that I'm not sure it's clear in the Bible that we read, but I read more into it and more into the Hebrew was that she was not, it wasn't that she was asked to come show herself off. She was literally asked to like put her turban on and nothing else.
Yeah. Just
and to come show off that way. So that's a very different request, right? It's not like, she's not saying, no, I'm over here partying with my friends. I'm not coming to your house. That's not what she said. She said, no, I'm not going to bow to your every whim, especially when it puts me at shame.
Right.
When it puts me in a position of such lack of power, right? That's what she said. And to that point, that's why I started out by saying when we know that he's willing to put people to death for something absurd, because he asked something absurd of her.
Yeah,
realistically, he asked something absurd. Maybe not for the times, and I understand context is important there. But she had the stones to stand up and say no.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this makes me look at Esther with even more power. And the reason is I don't buy into that either. But what she just saw is somebody refused to come to the king's court and get killed for it.
Yep.
And what she's doing is really breaking the law. And when you're not invited into the king's court, you're not welcome.
Right.
You cannot go there. It is punishable by death.
Yes.
So she's seeing that and still chose to go before the king in the king's court without being summoned. And she wasn't summoned for over a month.
Yeah.
And she still chose to go in. So what I'm seeing is correct. I don't think Vashti is the first feminist. I think she was strong-willed.
Right.
But I think Esther now, it even puts more power into her trust and faith in the Lord and what she's done, because she went and risked. Listen, she already knows the king is willing to kill you for something like that.
For nothing.
So, for this, she's going, I know it's punishable by death. I'm still going to face my fear and go forward and enter into his court. And that's, to me, shows just her strength and how amazing she is.
Yeah. As a person, as well as a follower and a believer of God, of Yahweh.
Exactly.
I mean, that's both. Again, we talk a lot on this podcast. Like, there's the literal side, but there's also the meaning side and the symbolism and the grand allegory of all these things. And even as a non-female, I can look at this and go, man, this is strong. Like, this is faith. This is being tested.
Yep.
This is putting your God before all things. This is submitting all to your heart, soul, and I forgot what they were. All three were, but
mind, heart, and soul.
Mind, heart, and soul.
Mind.
Yeah, I forgot about mind. I often forget about mind, as you can be aware. So,
would you have had the strength? I'm curious. Would you have had the strength to do what she did? Would you have had the courage and the faith to do what she did?
I'm not sure.
Right.
I really am not sure I would have that kind of courage. I would hope that I would, but you don't know until you are in that exact position,
right,
what you're going to do. Am I going to obey God, even though it may cost me my life, or am I just going to play it safe?
Yeah. And I think sometimes circumstances elevate you, to do something outside of what you would probably do normally.
True.
Right. The circumstances here was to release the people from maybe getting annihilated, right? Her people.
Right.
So I think that purpose, or her trying to speak to Xerxes to talk them out of it, was warranted to try to.
There's a moment too that I was reminded of. Like, not only was she saving the people, but she needed to be reminded for a second. She was kind of a little bit high on herself, maybe not high on herself like that, but she had to be reminded. Do you think that you are going to be the only Jew who's spared?
Yeah.
Like, so clearly there was Mordecai's inferring that maybe she felt herself to be separate. She needs to remember
her people.
She needs to remember that she's a part of this.
Yeah.
She needs to remember that she's a part of that, and that she's not above it, beside it, or around it. She is it.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And that's easy for us to do, isn't it?
That's the thing. I think we all have a tendency to go, well, that's somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
Right. And for this was the moment for her to go, wait a second, it's not everybody else's problem. It's my problem.
Exactly. That's why God put me here at this time, at this place.
Yeah. She was brave, I thought, to do that, because I thought differently, Jason. I thought she was a queen that had it all.
Yeah.
Didn't really have to do much. She was loved by Xerxes and everybody else. She was fine. She didn't have to. She didn't have to risk it all.
Right.
Remember, he didn't know she was Jewish until she said something. So there you go. It was like, to me, I think she would have been spared maybe, but she didn't have to risk it all.
Yeah, it's super possible. Super possible.
Yeah.
It was the reading that I read that Mordecai had to remind her, that made me think, like, maybe she knows, maybe he knows, but he needs to remind her that you're not segmenting from this. You don't get out of this.
Yeah, you're part of this.
You don't get out of this just because you have the queen title.
Yeah, she had her part to play. I thought it was good.
What I will say, and I apologize for Jason and Javi, but I do believe the only person sitting here right now that would have followed would be Mary.
I agree.
I have been in the ring with a lot of people, and none of them have scared me the way that she does. So I will say that she would definitely be the one to follow in Esther's footsteps. Now, I know we do talk about this, but do you see Esther, the book of Esther, as truly happening or symbolism?
Well, I don't see it as necessarily one or the other. I do believe it is historically accurate, because the text doesn't lend us to think anything else, but it's a true history book. But I think it can speak to us both historically and symbolically to today. I feel like we're kind of in that same position, that it is time for Christians to speak up and speak out and speak for people, because days ahead are going to be hard. And so I think it's maybe both.
Jason, I'm curious what you think. Always.
I always say, it's not that I say that I don't believe in the literality. Mm-hmm. It's that I say that sometimes the literality causes struggles with my understanding and my own experience.
Right.
So it's not that I separate myself from the literality at all. It's just that I also have to be able to accept, like you said, it's not a this or that. It can be a this and that.
Right.
And so whether it's literal or not, which David is going to surprise you, I do think it's literal. I do think this one's literal, and I have far less of a problem finding this as literal as I do other books in the Bible.
Yeah. Right.
And so this one I do see as literal, but I always have to separate myself, only because in my own dark times, in my own quiet times, when I start to struggle with the literality of something, I can go, hold on, I don't need to understand that right now. In fact, if I don't understand it right now, it's not because the Bible's wrong, it's because I don't understand it yet, which was told to me by somebody very intelligent once. And so what I'm able to do is I'm just able to, like, put it on the side until I understand it, until I'm able to understand why I don't understand it. But I can still hold on to the symbology of it. I can still hold on to the metaphor of it. I can still hold on to the meaning of it. And that is what gets me through it, holds me up. And it's what guides my life, even when the other things seem to be, wiggling around a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Me growing up Jewish and celebrating Purim, which I love because you have Hamantashen and you get to dress up in different outfits.
Right?
And, it was just always a fun. Listen, Jews have some rough holidays. We have some holidays where we sit there for hours and hours and hours and hours and you read and you're hungry as a kid. And this is one of those fun holidays where you're like, hey, I'm just celebrating and eating and having a good time and getting money and getting gifts.
Right,
and it's wonderful. It's a wonderful holiday. So for me, I'm going, it's absolutely true because it has to be. Because I loved it as a kid.
That's actually one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons I believe it's more true than that because they do celebrate a holiday based on this particular event, and there's you really have to work hard not to see that connection.
Yeah, I thought it was true because the book says, "Hey, this has been written down. Go out there and search it. These are real names and stuff like that. This has really happened." I mean, what is that? Esther 9:32 says Esther's decree confirmed these regulations about Purim, and it was written down in the records. So to me, that's
there. You go.
Right. Go look for it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like I said,
David
now I just went back to
David
my
just
childhood.
Wants the presents.
I want the Hamantashen, actually. I told you the food is way to my heart.
But what do you wear? Like, what is it? The costumes?
It's different costumes? Yeah, it's different costumes. Prince, princess, things like that. So you wear different. Purim, the actual name of Purim means lots. And this is from when Haman would cast lots for what date would be the destruction of the Jews. And obviously that got spoiled, and now so we celebrate the festival, the Feast of Lots, which is celebrating the fact that it didn't matter what date, he could have chosen any date. God was going to provide and he was going to protect us, and it was the protection that he used through Esther. So for me, it is a literal. Yes, it has symbology there. Yes, I can look at it and go, hey, in these days, how can I have my Esther moment? And that's something that I look at and I go, how do I have my Esther moment? Because I asked the question of who would be able to act as she did. And I agree. I don't know if I would. In fact, a lot of me kind of goes towards the side of, I don't think I could.
Right.
But there are Esther moments out there for all of us. There are times when we could be faithful and courageous. And I hope to have my Esther moment in this life.
And I think we have to seek our Esther moments too. I think that we're going to fail most of the times when we're called, but at least if we keep saying, I want to, every time that's it. And every time we say, I want to, we're one step closer to the time that we actually get the Esther moment and we say yes.
I agree.
So the last question I have is, because it's very important to know what to do about it, is how do we apply this today? How do we apply the story of Esther? And I know we touched on it a little bit through this conversation, but if somebody was going to say, hey, why is this book relevant to today? What would I tell them?
I think you could tell them that Esther is a model for being courageous. Even when it doesn't make sense, you don't understand God's plan. You don't know why he's making you do this or that, but just to follow him in what I call blind faith, to be courageous. I think it also teaches us to speak up for our people. We as Christians tend to tear each other down when we should be speaking up and encouraging each other.
Very true.
Yeah.
And then I think teaches us to be willing to share our background and our life experiences, because I don't think anything happens to us that we cannot turn around and share it with someone else.
Right.
Who's maybe going through the same thing or something like that. God wants us to share that, wants us to, be open and transparent.
You know what never hit me until just now? Just to flip the script on it. Like, I think everybody reads Esther and wants to be Esther, right? But I think a lot of us, if we're struggling with our Esther moment, why can't we be Mordecai? Maybe we need to be pushing to be more Mordecai. It's like, maybe I am going to fail when you ask me the question, but I can help other people.
That's right.
I can help other people.
Which is what he did.
Which is exactly what he did. He stood outside of her, out in the courtyard every day to see how she was doing. He to some extent, he pastored to her, or he was evangelized to her, and he was very committed to her as her legal father to an extent.
And I think he had as much success in this as she did.
Yeah, exactly.
Because without him, I'm not sure she would have done.
Well, and not only did she succeed, he succeeded,
Yes.
especially when Haman got his
Right.
dues, which I think is more the political side than the personal side. But then ultimately the entire people
Yes.
succeeded as
She
well.
saved
He
her
also
people.
became second in command.
Well, I mean, think of this though. If
Yeah.
there was no Mordecai in the story, there would have been no story.
Exactly.
So I'm not taking anything away from Esther, but
No.
I think there's life and Christianity and our communities are about people, not a person.
That's right.
And I think this story is important to remember that it's about the connection of all the people
The
together.
only person it's about is Jesus Christ.
That's it.
And he is the connector.
Yeah.
You know, we talk a lot about that at church, that our church exists to connect people with God and with others who will connect people to God. And I think that connection we're missing in a lot of our churches today. Not at the local church, but a lot of churches are missing it.
And one of the things I look at is what if, because I do agree that sometimes Christians don't act very Christian-like to each other.
Right.
What if we're Haman? What if we're looking at our pride and we're looking at our ego?
I don't like that.
And
You
no.
love dropping those, don't
I
you?
know.
You love dropping those.
But there are times where we live for our pride. And that's what he was. Hey, Mordecai, you didn't bow to me.
That's it.
It wasn't that you were Jewish.
Right.
It's
That's
that
it.
you didn't bow to me. So now I hate you. It was a pride and ego thing. And then even when the king was saying, how do we exalt somebody? How do we give somebody praise? He thought it was about him. And he's like, hey, do all these great things. And it wasn't for him. What if we're acting more like Haman and go, how do I learn from that story and go, I don't want to be this guy? Because we read the story and every one of us is like, that guy's terrible. I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you take a second, you go, am I that guy?
Am I that guy?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Wow. I mean, I would love to leap to be Mordecai and a double leap to be Esther, but am I Haman? And then you look and you go, I don't want to be that person. And now I need to pray and fast and go, God, I need to get on your track, not the right track, because the right track is still about ego and pride. I need to get on your track.
Yeah.
And how do I do this better? How do I go through this life better? How do I set up with a community and surround myself with people that'll help me be better?
The scary part is, I think we've probably always, I mean, not always, but like we've probably been a Haman before.
For
You
sure.
know,
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
in our self like involvement and just kind of egos. I feel like I could look back and maybe go, wow, I was a Haman there.
This has been a phenomenal episode. I really appreciate Mary, you being here and
Thank you,
sharing
Mary.
some of your
It's my
wisdom with
pleasure.
us.
This has been awesome. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I know I
Anytime.
started this with Mary being the heartbeat in the womb, but being that it's Women's History Month, I just want to end with, we had done an episode where we talked about the woman and she was, made for the helper of man. And when you look at the word helper, it's actually the same word as Holy Spirit. It's counselor.
Mhm.
Wow.
It's a counsel. That's the original word. And let me tell you that without women like Mary and some of the people in my life have been there, and some of these strong women that have endured things that we have no idea about. It's just a real privilege to be able to share some time with you, share a microphone with you.
Oh, my pleasure.
And you really are just an amazing counselor to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us on our first guest
Yeah.
podcast. We hope it's
I'm
the first
excited.
of many.
I'm the first.
We're very excited, and so we hope to hear from you guys soon. Let us know if you have something, comments, questions for Mary.
Yes.
If you have any feedback, comments, questions.
I was going to say we'll have her information on the show
In the
notes.
show notes,
Yeah.
One thing is I send out a weekly devotion
Yes.
on each Monday. And they can just go to my website, and it takes about 3 seconds to sign up for that. So if anybody's interested in
Awesome.
Would love to do that. And the website we'll put in the show notes as well.
that. Okay.
So please send us some comments, send them some emails, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
See ya.